The house had finally become perfect. After months of renovations, picking paint shades, searching for the right furniture, and stressing over every tiny detail, it truly felt like a home. Our home. I had spent endless hours shaping this space, putting in not just money, but my heart and soul too. It wasn't simply a house anymore. It stood for what I believed my marriage to Daniel could become: a true partnership, a new beginning, a place where we could grow and build something meaningful together. That's why, when he casually dropped the news during dinner, it hit me like a slap to the face. "So, Greg is going to stay with us for a while," he said, stabbing a piece of chicken with his fork. "Just until he gets back on his feet." I looked at him, stunned, not sure I'd heard that correctly. "Greg? Your friend? The one getting divorced?" "Yeah," Daniel replied, chewing like it was no big deal at all. "He needs a place to stay, and he's bringing his dog, too." I slowly set my fork down as my appetite vanished. "How long is a while?" He shrugged. "Until further notice." My name is Julia, and I'm 36 years old. For the past year, I had poured all my energy into this home. It wasn't just about fixing walls and floors. It was about creating peace, safety, and a future. A place where Daniel and I could finally settle down and begin the next chapter of our lives. But over time, I had started noticing something that deeply bothered me. Daniel had a habit of making big decisions on his own. Whether it was changing jobs, planning trips, or now inviting his newly divorced best friend to live with us without a time limit, he never asked for my input. My thoughts always came last. Whenever I voiced concerns, he brushed them off with a careless, "It's fine," or "We'll figure it out." And every time I swallowed my feelings and let it go, telling myself it wasn't worth the argument. But this time was different. This house was supposed to be our shared space, the one place where I believed my voice would finally matter. Yet here he was again, turning our lives upside down without even talking to me first. "Daniel," I said, trying my best to stay calm, "don't you think we should have discussed this first? This is a huge decision." He looked at me like I had just said something completely absurd. "Why? It's my house too. I don't need your permission to help my best friend." My stomach tightened. "This isn't just about Greg. We just finished moving in. We were finally settling down. Now you're inviting someone to live with us indefinitely. And what about his dog? What about our privacy? Our space? This doesn't only affect you, it affects both of us." Daniel sighed heavily and leaned back in his chair. "It's not a big deal. Greg is going through a hard time, and I'm not abandoning him. He's my best friend. You'd do the same if it were one of your friends." "That's not the point," I replied, my voice sharper now. "The point is, you didn't ask me. You decided on your own, and now I'm just expected to accept it like I have no say at all." "It's my house too, Julia," he snapped, his tone turning cold and defensive. "And my decision is final." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. My decision is final. Not our decision, his decision. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. Daniel didn't see me as an equal partner. He saw me as someone who would adjust, bend, and fit into whatever he wanted. And what hurt the most was that he expected me to accept it quietly, without pushing back. I stared at him across the table, my heart racing. Every part of me wanted to explode. I wanted to yell, to tell him exactly how wrong he was. But instead, I forced myself to take a slow, deep breath. Because if there was one thing I had learned over the years, it was this: arguing with Daniel almost never led to anything good. He would always dig in his heels, push harder, and somehow turn the blame back onto me. So this time, I did something I had never done before. I stayed quiet. "Okay," I said at last, my voice steady but cold. "If that's how you feel, Daniel." He frowned, clearly expecting more from me. "That's it?" I simply nodded. "That's it." I cleared the table without another word and walked into the bedroom, while Daniel settled back onto the couch and turned on the TV. My hands were shaking as I loaded the dishwasher. The anger was boiling just beneath the surface. He thought he had won. He assumed I'd drop it, just like I always did. But this time, he was wrong. That night, as Daniel slept peacefully beside me, I lay wide awake staring at the ceiling. The house I had spent months creating no longer felt like mine. It felt like a stage for someone else's choices, someone else's rules. And I knew one thing for certain: if I didn't stand up for myself now, it would only keep getting worse. That's when a plan began to take shape in my mind. At first, it was small and unclear, but with every passing minute, it grew sharper. I wasn't going to shout, I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to argue or try to change his mind. I was going to show him exactly what it felt like to make a life-changing decision without considering the other person. When he arrived with Greg and that dog, they were going to learn just how final my decisions could be. Over the next few days, I quietly put my plan into motion. Daniel had no idea what was happening. Why would he? He had made it very clear he believed his word was law, and just like always, he assumed I would fall in line without protest. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I had spent too much time, effort, and energy making this place our home. I wasn't about to let it turn into someone else's crash pad with no limits and no questions asked. The first step was the locks. While Daniel was at work, I called a locksmith and explained that I needed all the exterior locks replaced. I told him it was just a precaution. I explained it to the man while forcing a polite smile as he worked the drill. He didn't need to know my personal reasons, and honestly, I wasn't even ready to say out loud what had pushed me to this point. When he finished, he handed me the new keys. I held them in my palm, feeling a small surge of control I hadn't felt in months. Step 2 was taking back my space. I walked through every room of the house, noticing everything that reflected Daniel's choices instead of ours. The oversized recliner he refused to get rid of. The ugly coffee table his mother had given us. The ridiculous sports collectibles covering the walls. One by one, I moved it all into the garage. When I finally stepped back and looked around, the house felt different, lighter. It finally felt like mine. That evening, Lauren came over to help me lock in the final details of my counterplan. She had been my best friend since college, the one person who always told me the truth, even when it wasn't easy to hear. "You're really going to do this?" she asked, stretched out on the freshly cleared couch. "Absolutely," I said as I poured 2 glasses of wine. "He wants to make big decisions on his own? Fine, let's see how he feels when I do the same." Lauren grinned and lifted her glass. "I love this for you, but seriously, what's the end game? What happens when he shows up with Greg and the dog?" I took a slow sip, enjoying the moment. "I'll remind them that this is my house too. They can either respect my boundaries, or they can come up with another plan. I'm done bending over backward for Daniel's nonsense." The next step was getting ready for their arrival. I had no intention of turning Greg away outright. I knew it wasn't Greg's fault that Daniel had crossed a line, but that didn't mean I was going to lay out a welcome mat either. I prepared the guest room with only the basics: a mattress, 1 pillow, and an old blanket. No extras, no comforts, no room for the dog. Nothing that said, "Make yourself at home." If Daniel wanted to play the role of generous host, he would have to do it without my help. At the same time, I packed a small bag with a few of Daniel's essentials and placed it by the front door. It wasn't meant as a threat, not exactly. It was a reminder. This was my home too, and I would defend it if he continued to ignore my voice. The real piece of resistance was the letter. I spent hours writing it, carefully choosing every word so it landed exactly how I intended. It wasn't an angry outburst. That wasn't my style. It was calm, direct, and firm. It clearly stated how I felt and what I expected going forward. "Daniel," it read, "this house is our shared home. That means decisions about it should be made together. By inviting Greg to live here without talking to me first, you dismissed my feelings and damaged our partnership. I will not accept being treated like an afterthought in my own home. If Greg stays here, it will be under my conditions, not yours. And if you can't respect that, you are free to leave. I printed the letter, sealed it inside an envelope, and taped it to the front door. It would be the very first thing Daniel and Greg saw when they arrived. The days leading up to their arrival felt strangely quiet. Daniel mentioned Greg here and there, casually talking about the arrangements he had made, but he never asked for my input. That was fine by me. I kept my replies short and neutral, hiding my growing anticipation behind a calm exterior. Lauren checked in with me every day, half amused and half excited. "I wish I could see their faces when they read that letter," she said during one of our calls. "Do you think Daniel will even understand what he did wrong?" I sighed, rubbing my thumb over the new keys in my pocket. Honestly, probably not. But that's not the point. This isn't about him understanding. It's about me finally standing up for myself. At last, the day arrived. Daniel texted me that morning to say they'd be at the house around 6 p.m. "Make sure everything is ready for Greg," he added, as if I were some kind of hotel concierge. I rolled my eyes and got to work putting the final touches on my plan. The house was spotless. The guest room was perfectly mediocre. And the letter was taped firmly to the front door. As the clock crept closer to 6, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement twisting in my chest. For years, I had let Daniel's behavior slide, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. This time was different. This time, I was ready. When I heard the car pull into the driveway, my heart began to pound. I stood just out of sight in the kitchen, close enough to hear everything. I didn't need to see their faces to know the exact moment they found the letter. "What the hell is this?" Daniel's voice echoed through the house, sharp with confusion and anger. "Looks like a letter," Greg said more quietly. "Maybe you should read it." I held my breath as silence took over. I could almost feel the weight of my words sinking in. "What is this supposed to mean?" Daniel shouted as the front door slammed shut behind him. I stayed in the kitchen, letting the message sit with him. I wanted him to fully read it, to absorb it, before I stepped in. "What's going on?" Greg asked in a lower voice, uneasy now. "Should I leave? I don't want to cause any problems." "Oh, you're not leaving," Daniel snapped. "This is my house too, and no one makes rules without me." That's when I walked out of the kitchen, calm and composed, like I had just finished reading a book. "Oh, hi, Daniel." "Hi, Greg," I said casually. The relaxed tone caught both of them off guard. "I see you found the letter." Daniel turned toward me, the paper crushed in his fist. "What is this?" he demanded. "What are you trying to pull?" "I'm not pulling anything," I replied, folding my arms. "I'm reminding you that this is our home, and I won't sit quietly while you treat me like a guest in my own space." Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Hey, Julia, if this is a bad time, I can—" "No, Greg," I said gently but firmly. "This isn't your fault. You're just stuck in the middle of something Daniel should have handled properly." "Handled properly?" Daniel snapped, his face growing red. "You're the one acting crazy, changing the locks, rearranging the house. What are you even doing?" "I'm making a point," I said evenly. "For years, you've made choices that affected both of us without ever asking me. This house was supposed to be our fresh start, Daniel. Instead, you turned it into a dumping ground for everyone else's problems. And when I asked you to talk to me, you told me your decision was final." "Because it is," he shot back. "Greg is my best friend. He needed a place to stay, and I'm not apologizing for helping him." "And I'm not apologizing for standing up for myself," I replied, my voice steady but strong. "If Greg stays here, it will be under my terms, not yours." Greg raised both hands, trying to calm things down. "Look, maybe this isn't the right time for me to move in. I don't want to be the reason you two are fighting." Daniel turned on him, frustration spilling over. No, Greg, you're staying. Julia is overreacting. She'll get over it. I won't, I said flatly. Both men froze. This isn't something. You won't get over the years of being ignored, I said firmly. You've brushed me aside, dismissed my feelings, and taken me for granted for too long, Daniel. This time, I'm done crossing that line for you. Daniel gave a bitter laugh and gestured toward the guest room. So what? You're going to lock me out of my own house now? Good luck with that. I stepped forward and met his eyes without flinching. It's not just your house, Daniel. It's mine too. And if you can't treat me like your equal, then maybe you should be the one packing up and leaving. The room fell completely silent. Greg shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Daniel stared at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. For the first time in years, I saw doubt flicker across his face. You're serious, he said quietly. I've never been more serious, I answered. You've taken my patience for granted for too long. If you want this marriage to work, you're going to have to start listening to me. If not, I'll be fine on my own. Greg cleared his throat, breaking the heavy tension. Julia, he said carefully, I think I should go. This isn't my fight. You're right, I told him. It isn't. And I'm sorry you were pulled into the middle of this. This isn't about you. It's about boundaries. I hope you understand. Greg nodded, picked up his bag, and clipped the leash onto his dog. I'll figure something else out, he said, giving Daniel a meaningful look. You really need to take care of this man. When Greg left, Daniel and I were left standing in the entryway. The air between us felt thick and heavy. This is ridiculous, he muttered, pacing back and forth. All of this over Greg staying here for a little while. It's not just about Greg, I replied, my tone softer now but still steady. It's about how you treat me. You didn't ask me. You didn't think about my feelings. You just assumed I would follow whatever you decided. That's not a partnership, Daniel. He stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging a little. I didn't think it was a big deal, he admitted reluctantly. I thought you'd understand. Well, I didn't, I said firmly. And if we're going to move forward together, that has to change. No more one-sided decisions, no more brushing me off. I'm your wife, not a tenant in your house. Daniel stood there in silence, staring at the crumpled letter in his hand. A long moment passed before he finally nodded. His voice was barely audible. I get it. Do you? I asked, unconvinced. He looked up at me, exhaustion written across his face, but his sincerity was clear. I do. I don't want to lose you, Julia. I nodded slowly. Then start acting like it. The house felt eerily quiet after Greg left. The absence of his dog, the bag he carried out the door, and the awkward farewell lingered in the air. Daniel dropped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands, as if the weight of the night had finally caught up with him. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like it was my job to fix everything. I kept busy in the kitchen, putting away glasses and straightening up, mostly to give myself room to think. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I had finally said everything I needed to say. How Daniel handled that was up to him. I wasn't going to carry that weight for him anymore. A few minutes later, he came into the kitchen. His footsteps were slow and careful. Julia, he said quietly, his voice softer than I expected. I need to talk. I turned to face him, leaning back against the counter. I'm listening. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. I was wrong, he said after a moment. About Greg, and about how I've been treating you. I've been selfish. I didn't stop to think about how any of this would make you feel. I stayed quiet. I wanted to believe him, but I had heard apologies before. Do you really understand why I'm upset? I asked carefully. I think so, he said, his brow tightening. It's not just about Greg moving in. It's about how I handled it, or didn't handle it, with you. I made it seem like your voice didn't matter, and that's not okay. I nodded slowly. No, it's not. He let out a long breath, his shoulders sinking. I've always been the kind of person who makes fast decisions, he said quietly. I didn't understand how much that was hurting us. You've had years to realize it, I answered, my tone firm but not cruel. And I've had years of being ignored and pushed aside. That ends now, Daniel. If you can't change, if we can't be true partners, I won't stay. My words clearly hit him hard. His jaw tightened, but he didn't fight back. Instead, he nodded. You're right. I don't want to lose you, Julia. I know I've messed this up, but I want to do better. That night, we slept in separate rooms. Not out of anger, but because I needed space to think. For years, I had carried the weight of Daniel's choices, giving up my comfort and my voice for the sake of our marriage. Standing up for myself felt powerful, it felt freeing, but it also left me wondering whether things could truly change. My mind replayed the night over and over, Greg's quiet exit, Daniel's explosion, and finally his attempt to take responsibility. Was it real? Could someone really change after so long? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was never going back to the way things had been. In the days that followed, Daniel made an effort. He began asking me about decisions, small ones, like where we should go for dinner, and bigger ones, like how we should divide responsibilities at home. It wasn't perfect. I could tell it didn't come naturally to him. But it was a beginning. For the first time in years, I felt like we might actually be partners. As for me, I started focusing on what made me happy. I redecorated parts of the house to reflect my own taste, adding personal touches that made the space feel like it truly belonged to me again. I spent more time with Lauren, meeting for coffee, laughing about the chaos of the past few weeks. Slowly, day by day, I began to feel like myself again, stronger, more confident, and no longer willing to settle for anything less than what I deserved. A month later, the house felt completely different. Not because of furniture or color changes, but because the energy had shifted. It felt calmer, more balanced, and for the first time in years, it truly felt like home. I had spent weeks reclaiming my space, not just physically, but emotionally too. And that effort had changed everything. Daniel had taken the confrontation seriously. He started therapy, not because I demanded it, but because he recognized that his behavior needed to change. One evening over dinner, he admitted something that stayed with me.